Okay, so this is the last section of notes that you need to write down from watching a screencast. Victory and consequences. This is when the war ends. Okay, I will show you. You need to be on this page of your notes, victory and consequences. You can write the notes down in any fashion you want. If you want to try to make an outline, that's good. If you want to just make a bulleted list of important information, you can do that. And then your vocab words will go on the side here. Okay, so let's go back to these notes. Let me make sure that we're in the right ones. Yes, we are. So when we start with Germany surrenders, this newspaper here, I want you to know that liberator means someone who sets others free from oppression. Oppression would be like really harsh treatment, people who are controlled, who are abused. So a liberator, think of the word liberty, that means freedom. A liberator is someone who sets other people free. Okay, so that is one of the key terms that you need. All right, now what's underlined is important. As usual, you should be in the section Germany surrenders, and you want to write down Allied forces fight their way through France. So when you made your map, Germany had already fought partially through France, and they controlled all the way to Paris. Now, citizens are going to help do this, but the Allied forces, Americans and the British, they're going to push their way through, even Canadians. And so they're going to push their way back through France and push the Germans back. Soviet forces from the Soviet Union, they're going to be fighting their way in from the east, from the other side. Okay, so they're coming at Germany from the east. They're going to get all the way to Berlin. They will be the ones who take the city of Berlin and force Germany's surrender. Okay, the Battle of the Bulge. This is kind of an interesting one. This was Hitler's last attempt to fight back, and it has a silly name. It's not named after a city or anything like that. But if you think about battles taking place, and the front line of the war is usually just sort of a line. It might not be straight, but it's a line. So Hitler's forces tried to push through the front line, and they formed a bump. When you look at a map, it looked like a bump, a pimple, something like that on the front line. And so that bulge is nicknamed the Battle of the Bulge because it formed a bulge in the front line. All right, so Soviets entered Berlin on April 30th, 1945, and Hitler actually committed suicide along with his girlfriend, wife. They weren't officially married, but kind of like that. The two of them killed themselves. Hitler ordered his men to burn his body after he was dead. He told them, this is the plan. If the Soviets enter, I can't be captured. I don't want them to take my body. So his plan was to kill himself and then have his body burned. They weren't able to get it done. They weren't able to burn the body, but he did kill himself, and the Soviets took the body. Okay, we'll get more into the gruesome details of what happened to it later. But what we discovered as soldiers were entering Germany, they were discovering that something really horrific was happening to the Jewish people there. Okay, horrors of the Holocaust. Now, Holocaust is a key term, and what you want to put for that is what's underlined, the final solution. Nazis fought to exterminate the entire Jewish population of Europe. That's what the Holocaust was. Okay, they were rounding up all of the Jews they could possibly get to, and they were killing them. Okay, we'll talk about how in a minute here. Genocide is another key term you need. Genocide is the extermination of an entire race of human beings, an entire ethnic group. So any time in history that a leader has tried to get rid of an entire ethnic group or possibly even religious group, that is called genocide. You just want them to be wiped off the face of the earth. Okay, so those two key terms you will need, and you can pause if you need more time to write those down. Okay, how they did it. The word ghetto. A lot of people find it very offensive when people throw the word ghetto around, because what it was basically, it's a neighborhood in a city during Nazi Germany that was controlled by the military. They basically, as you can kind of see from the pictures, they basically fenced it in. They used the buildings to kind of help block people in. It was like an urban prison for Jews, okay? Mostly Jews. There were gypsies and there were Slavs. The gypsies basically don't have a homeland in Europe. They were kind of outsiders, kind of like Jews were without a homeland. Slavs are people from the Slavic region where Yugoslavia was on your map that you just made. Okay, and these people were seen as enemies of the Nazis. So they were put into these ghettos, severely overcrowded, underfed. They were not provided with enough food. They couldn't work. Basically, this was like a prison. Okay, labor camps were also used by the Nazis. They would take Jewish people who were able to do work and they'd put them in these labor camps. And as you can see from the pictures, they were making uniforms, they were making weapons, they were basically forced labor. Of course, they weren't treated very well and they weren't fed very much. So a lot of Jewish people in the labor camps actually died because they weren't cared for at all, and they weren't healthy. Okay, the final solution: death camps. Death camps were not work camps. There was no place for anyone to stay. Like in the work camps, they had barracks, like army barracks, where the Jewish people that were working were staying. The death camps didn't have this. They simply had gas chambers and furnaces. So the people would be brought in by train and they would be kind of corralled and told that they needed to go into these almost like giant pole barns. And they told them they were showers, and out of the shower heads would come toxic gas. And that's how they executed the Jews. Then the bodies were burned, cremated, okay? And anything of value they had was taken, so that it could be sold and that the German government could make money off of them. So we know at least 6 million Jews were murdered this way, but historians now say that the estimate is much closer to 8 million. And then, of course, there were 3 to 6 million other people that were killed along with Jews. Okay, the Nazis also murdered the disabled. And here's some of the disabilities that they considered people to be biological enemies if they had these disabilities. That meant that they were born with them, and they threatened the perfect race that they were trying to create. So a person with any kind of mental illness or severe learning disability, something like Down syndrome perhaps, severe autism, things like that. Physical deformity, so anything that you were born with that physically was unusual. Epilepsy, so that's when people have seizures. Blindness or deafness, those people were exterminated. Okay, right from the time they were babies, anyone with a disability would be killed. He had propaganda. Hitler had propaganda where he referred to people with disabilities as life unworthy of life. So yes, these are living things, but they shouldn't be. They don't deserve to live. Useless eaters was another slogan. Obviously, would have been in German, but useless eaters meant that people like this were a waste of food, and Germany needed food. Okay, they were a burden on society. So he was trying to convince people that it was best to just get rid of them. So when I talk about propaganda, kind of like war propaganda, it's trying to sway people's beliefs. So here we have the two perfect Aryan citizens of Germany. And then this is a propaganda ad about Jews and just kind of showing how Jews were evil and they caused all our problems and things like that. Down below, they have photographs here of children born with disabilities. Okay, and this is basically talking about whether they deserve to live. Okay, on the other side here, they show a man with a disability, and they show how much it costs for him to live, basically, his living expenses. Then over here, they show that the same amount of money can keep a family of 5 surviving. So they're trying to show that this is a drain on the economy. These people with disabilities are too expensive. So again, trying to convince people that they really shouldn't live, which is just horrific for us to think about today. Historians estimate from 11 to 15 million people died as a result of the Nazis' extermination policies towards biological enemies. Okay, now if you look at what I have shown you there, if you combine the population of those 5 states, okay, it's actually a little bit more than that. Okay, now next page of notes, the decision to use the bomb. Okay, this is all about what happened in Japan. The Germans had to surrender when the Soviets came into Berlin. The Japanese did not want to do that yet. They were not ready. So here's what convinces them. The Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. These are both key terms. Allied scientists worked to develop an atomic bomb. That was the Manhattan Project. And the atomic bomb was a weapon that could produce tremendous power by splitting atoms. And shown on the right in the picture there is an actual atomic bomb exploding. Okay, you can pause if you need a minute to write those down. Allies, that would be the US, Great Britain, France. Okay, Allies demanded an unconditional surrender from Japan, basically saying no deals are going to be made. You're just going to quit. You're going to surrender to us. Japan refused. So the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. This is the US, it's the one and only time that someone actually used an atomic bomb against a population of people. And that was Hiroshima, August 6th, 1945. What did this do? Well, you can see from the picture, it pretty much leveled a city. 80,000 people were killed instantly from the explosion. And then there was radiation sickness that came afterwards because atomic bombs give off radioactive waste, and it makes people very sick. And so people were dying mostly of things like leukemia, right away radiation sickness. But yeah, some of this was ongoing. So people continued to suffer even after, months and months after. All right, Japan still refused to surrender even though that bomb had been dropped. So the US came back 3 days later, dropped a bomb on Nagasaki. 22,000 people died immediately. And that's not because the bomb was smaller. That's because the city was smaller. There were less people. Japan then surrendered on August 15th. Okay, so just for your information, you do not have to memorize this or write it down, but at least 60 million people died in World War II, and over half of them were civilians, so people not fighting in the military, just citizens. Okay? So a lot of those were exterminated by the Nazis. Okay, I want to share this with you really quick. The causes of the U.S. entering World War II. What made us enter World War II? Okay, the U.S. allies were being attacked by Germans. We wanted to help Great Britain. We wanted to help France. Roosevelt knew that Jews, Gypsies, and Poles, etc., were being persecuted in Europe. He did not understand just how bad it was. No one in the US really understood that there were gas chambers and that people were dying by the hundreds of thousands and then millions. We didn't realize that. The Germans attacked US ships carrying supplies to the Allies just like before World War I. Japan invaded its neighboring countries. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. That was really our last straw when we decided we had to get involved. Germany and Japan declared war on the United States just days after Pearl Harbor. And that definitely drew us in. What caused the Allied forces to win? How were they able to win this war? There's a few things. The Allies decided first, the defeat of Germany was the biggest priority. Okay, Germany was the most important one, and that was a deal that Roosevelt made with Great Britain, that it would be the Germans first. Okay, so all our energy went that direction to start with. The Soviet Union joined the Allies. That is going to help their side. Definitely. Okay, they worked hard to better train their armies. So the Soviets were absolutely determined to be part of this and to make sure the Germans were conquered. The United States supplied massive amounts of war supplies, more than possible for the Axis powers to match. They just simply couldn't keep up with the amount of weapons and supplies that the US was sending over. So all those women back in the factories that were working made a huge difference in this war. Had they not done that, had they not been building planes and ships and tanks and jeeps and all those things that were necessary, it would have been much more difficult to win the war. Okay, the Allied forces also had better technology. We had radar and sonar. Radar allows planes to be able to know where they're going even in the dark. And sonar allows submarines to be able to see where they're going underwater, even when it's dark. Okay, we had better planes. We had depth finders. We had atomic bombs, of course. There was an island hopping campaign that you read about where the United States military only took islands that were critical, the really important ones. They didn't have to go everywhere. They limited and sent all their energy into certain islands to defeat. Okay, that's how that worked. And then Hitler's fighting tactics were just not that smart. Okay, he was too easy to predict. So good for us that he wasn't good at figuring out battle strategies. Okay, that is the last page. Notice none of this was underlined, but it is helpful for you to know that these are the things that caused the US to get involved, and they are the reasons that the Allies won. Okay, you are done with notes. If you have completed everything else, you're going to be able to use these on your test. So definitely, if you're doing the digital version of notes, you can turn those in on Schoology just as soon as you're done. If you're doing the paper copy of notes, because you're an in-person learner normally, then you're going to want to hang on to that until your test is done. Alrighty.